Distinguished representatives, please be seated. Distinguished representatives, I declare open the second plenary meeting. This afternoon, we will begin the consideration of agenda item 7, general debate. Pursuant to the programme of work we adopted this morning, the general debate will continue tomorrow morning and afternoon. States are invited, in accordance with Rule 50 of the Rules of Procedure of the Assembly, to deliver statements of no longer than 5 minutes. In order to accommodate all speakers, this time limit shall be strictly observed. In order to assist the speakers with the timely delivery of their statements, a light mechanism was installed at the lectern. I would invite delegations to please check the list of speakers dated 2nd of December 2024 at 13:15, available at the conference officer's desk, as there have been multiple changes. States were able to submit written or pre-recorded statements in lieu of in-person statements by 2nd December 24 for posting on the respective webpage of the Assembly. Let us proceed immediately with our first speaker. I would give floor to Her Excellency Ms. Dembasil Simelan, Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development of South Africa. Madam, you have the floor.
Madam President, thank you very much for the opportunity to address the Assembly on behalf of the Republic of South Africa. I would like to firstly congratulate the 5 members of the Board of Directors of the Trust of Funds for Victims, the 5 members of the Committee on Budget and Finance, and the 9 members of the Advisory Committee on Nominations of Judges on their election. We wish them a successful tenure, and they can be assured of our unwavering support. We again reaffirm our unwavering commitment to the principle enshrined in the Rome Statute, particularly the rule of law, the pursuit of international justice and accountability, which are pivotal and vital in the building of a more just and equitable international order. For the rule of law to thrive, it must be applied consistently and impartially to avoid any perception of double standards. The strength of the ICC lies in the confidence of the states and individuals that justice will be served without fear or favor equally across all regions. Selective or inconsistent application of justice not only undermines this confidence, but risks eroding the foundation of the court's independence and legitimacy. Madam President, we appreciate the significant steps that have been taken in the past year in various situations, including the conviction and sentencing of Mr. Al-Hassan and the issuing of the arrest warrants. In particular, South Africa welcomes the progress in the investigation into the crimes committed in the situation in the state of Palestine, which has produced evidence considered sufficiently compelling for the pre-trial chamber to issue 3 arrest warrants in that situation against leaders of Israel as well as Hamas. At this time, we're also aware that the ICC is at a critical juncture and the court's ability remains independent and impartial has never been more crucial. It is necessary for states parties to reaffirm their commitment to the Rome Statute. South Africa strongly condemns the continued attacks and threats against the ICC, its officials, and its operations. These acts of intimidation are not solely attacks on the individuals, but we view them as attacks on the establishment of the international justice itself. The ICC's ability to deliver justice depends on the safety and the independence of its staff and officials. We also welcome Ukraine's accession to the Rome Statute. South Africa believes that all states parties must adhere to the principle of the Rome Statute without reservation. We should avoid a situation of inadvertently undermining the principle of the universal jurisdiction, which lies at the heart of the ICC mandate. Madam President, South Africa wishes to commend the work done under the review mechanism and reaching to its conclusion. We encourage state parties to remain engaged with the process of implementation and monitoring of the recommendations of independent experts. In the coming months, state parties will also engage in a review of the Kampala amendments, particularly on the amendments on the crime of aggression. Many states have not yet ratified the amendment. Nevertheless, we look forward to inclusive discussions of this important issue. While a collective political message from ASP is an important step, it is equally important that state parties support the court through cooperation and ensuring that necessary domestic laws and procedures are in place to execute cooperation requests. We acknowledge the ICC's operation, including investigations, prosecution, witness protection, outreach, which require adequate and sustaining funding. However, we must also be cognizant of the difficult financial realities faced by the state parties. South Africa therefore supports an approach that allows for a reasonable but limited increase in the budget to absorb unavoidable costs brought about by inflation, and also take into account exceptional needs such as security of the court, maintenance of the court premises, fast-tracking and the tracing of fugitives, amongst others. Madam President, South Africa values the contribution of civil society in fostering justice, accountability, and the rule of law. Civil society organizations have been pivotal in shaping and supporting the Rome Statute since its inception. As we deliberate during this 23rd session, South Africa calls on the state parties to deepen their engagement with civil society and foster collaborative partnerships. As we conclude, Madam President, South Africa remains committed to building a stronger, more inclusive Rome Statute system. Let us, more than our deliberations during this session, lead to a meaningful progress and strengthen our collaborative effort to bring about a more just and a peaceful world. Ngiyabonga. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency for her statement. I now give the floor to the second speaker, His Excellency Riyad Malki, Minister, Special Advisor to the President for International Relations of the State of Palestine. You have the floor.
Madam President, I'm honored to be here today to speak on behalf of the Palestinian people, enduring an ongoing genocide and determined to achieve accountability for them. It goes without saying that no one could or should unhear the screams of a mother who did everything in her power to save her children and failed. Or unsee the parents holding their decapitated babies in one hand while carrying the others to safety and never finding it. Humanity cannot forget the faces of orphans taken care of by the next closest relative until none remains. Or the families wandering the streets, traumatized, aching, desperate, coming from nowhere, heading to nowhere, repeatedly displaced until they are burned alive in their tents. Over the past 14 months, the world has watched as Israel committed the unfathomable, forced mass displacement, deliberate starvation, systematic destruction of all elements of life, including healthcare, education, and infrastructure, They watched or acted in complicity as Israel looked Gaza, a tiny enclave of 365 square kilometers, and turned it into a living hell for over 2 million civilians in it. During this time, Israel slaughtered over 44,000 Palestinians in Gaza, 17,000 children murdered, 12,000 women killed, over 1,400 families obliterated, nearly 3,500 other families massacred and survived by only one member of those families, and over 11,000 people still remain under the rubble, unaccounted for. Israel has created the biggest cohort of amputee children in history and turned over 35,000 children into orphans of one or both parents. During this ongoing genocide, Israel's wholesale slaughter has created the bone-chilling medical term, wounded child with no surviving family. Take a moment to process this term and grasp the totality of its horror. Madam President, no state party can legally justify Israel's genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity, none. The evidence is insurmountable and compelling. International law experts have been crystal clear about what is transpiring, as has the International Court of Justice, as well as the Office of the Prosecutor and the Honorable Judges of the Pretrial Chamber. The Rome Statute is rooted in two fundamental premises. One, there is no justification for crimes, and two, there is no impunity for perpetrators of crimes, irrespective of their official capacity. Acting on these premises, South Africa, Bangladesh, Comoros, Djibouti, Belize, and Mexico and Chile referred the situation in the state of Palestine to the OTP. A referral preceded by Palestine's referral, on the basis of which a formal investigation was launched by the OTP in 2021. We are grateful and thankful for the principled support for the law and the Palestinian people's basic right to redress expressed by these distinguished state parties. The OTP and PTC have since confirmed what the Palestinian people have been saying and documenting. The OTP and the PTC have upheld their duties without fear and favor and have reminded us of the universality of the law. We welcome the issuance of the arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the ex-Minister of War, Yoav Gallant, and respect the independence and impartiality of the court and its different organs to continue its investigation in the situation in the state of Palestine, including on Israel's settlement enterprise. We have extended our full cooperation to the court, including the OTP, and spared no effort to help the investigation move forward, and will continue to do so. In this connection, we remind state parties of their legal obligations under the Rome Statute and their commitment to protect and preserve the court's independence. The continued functioning of the court depends on that. Let me put it plainly. State parties are obliged to execute the arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant. No ifs, no buts, no exceptions. Madam President, 50 years after the horrors of World War II, we built a court of international calling not for one group against another, but for all humanity. Palestine is not an exception to humanity or international law. Yet there are those who opposed Palestine joining the court and have resorted to every argument and tactic to circumvent the path to accountability for crimes committed against the Palestinian people. In fact, some state parties are now attempting to excuse themselves out of their obligations under the Rome Statute to preserve Israeli exceptionalism. It does not matter what debunked pretext such states parties are advancing to exempt accused Israeli war criminals from accountability. What they are in fact doing is endorsing anti-Palestinian racism and double standards, while also deconstructing the court and the mechanisms of international law, condemning humanity to lawlessness, and the normalization of the atrocities this court was established to combat. The court, without enforcement of its decisions, with states entrusted with upholding the Rome Statute, betraying their responsibility, with the officers of the court bullied, threatened, and intimidated without protection, this court would turn into a lawless desert. This court must work for all, or it will work for none at all. Under the Rome Statute and all other instruments of international law, all human lives are equal and all crimes and criminals are condemned. Israel is defying this court, from its prime minister to its soldiers. It is showing the deepest contempt for the law and the court established to protect it, while inciting states to defy the Rome Statute or impose sanctions on the court and states that comply with its decisions. Palestine and many like-minded states refuse to abandon the court. We will not forsake this international justice mechanism. We will not abandon the staff and officers of the court, nor allow them to be exposed to objectionable bullying, intimidation, and threats. We will not allow duplicity and supremacist ideology to create a reality where war criminals are shielded and persecutors and judges are punished. We all need to stand united against threats and sanctions aimed to interfere in the works of the court to uphold its mandate. Palestine renews its call in all states parties to respect the independence and impartiality of the court and to provide the political, legal, diplomatic, and financial support to the court to ensure its effectiveness. Finally, on the issue of supporting the court, Palestine cautions against the cynical exploitation of the important issue of reform efforts to undermine and impose punitive restrictions on the court. Such efforts are dangerous and threaten the viability of the court. To those ends, Palestine has formulated an initiative along with like-minded states to provide the needed budgetary requirements. My delegation also introduced language in the omnibus resolution recalling that such attacks and threats are an offense under Article 70 of the Rome Statute and calling on the OTP to act accordingly. Madam President, allow me to conclude with this thought. Humanity is at a crossroads. As state parties, we have an historic responsibility to stand up for the values and principles we enshrined into law. Otherwise, history will record that humanity slipped back into abominable lawlessness and the normalization of unspeakable atrocities. There is no middle ground. The choice is ours. May we make a choice future generations can be proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Eduardo Melchor Arana, Minister of Justice and Human Rights of Peru.
Good afternoon. Madam President of the Assembly of States Parties, Madam President of the International Criminal Court, distinguished members of the Bureau, distinguished delegates, and members of civil society who are accompanying us this afternoon, I would like to begin my statement by expressing my gratitude to the President as well as to the Vice Presidents for the work that they have done during this session. And also, we would like to extend our gratitude to the staff of the Secretariat that has done an excellent job preparing this session of the Assembly. Peru wishes to express its firm support to the International Criminal Court. This is a court that is working hard in a spirit of impartiality and independence, and in an international context that is particularly difficult. Now, more than ever, the cooperation of all states parties is indispensable if we are to uphold the legitimacy of this body, which for the more than last 2 decades has been fighting against impunity for the most serious crimes. Madam President, Peru is firmly committed to the ICC and its mandate. We have approved and ratified the amendments to the Rome Statute of the ICC relating to the crime of aggression, as well as the amendment of Article 8 of the Rome Statute. We eagerly await the Amendment Review Conference on the crime of aggression to be held in 2025. Furthermore, Peru and the court have been engaged in a very constructive dialogue focusing on signing a cooperation agreement on executing sentences handed down by the court, and we hope that all of this work will wrap up soon. My country has been a participant in a series of meetings of the Hague Working Group and in New York, in which we've addressed matters of relevance to the court. For example, we've been closely tracking the evaluation and implementation of the recommendations that have emerged from these mechanisms. All of this seeks to substantially improve the work of the court. I would also like to pay tribute to the performance of our compatriot, Magistrate Luz del Carmen Ibáñez Carranza. She's the former Vice President of the ICC. We remain convinced that her dedication and vast experience make a great asset to the institutions, to the work of the institutions, and its desire to fulfill its mission. Madam President, we're facing a very complex international situation, and the Assembly of States Parties gives us a unique chance to dialogue about the challenges that lie ahead for the court and what its role might be. Peru here would like to underscore the hard work done by the judges and the Office of the Prosecutor to fight against impunity and making sure that people around the world get access to justice. However, as we all know, the ICC doesn't have any enforcement bodies, so it relies exclusively on the cooperation of its states in order to fulfill its mandate. It's therefore our responsibility to abide strictly by the obligations that we've undertaken in signing and ratifying the statute. More than 2 decades have elapsed since the Conference of Rome, and the universality of the Rome Statute is still out of reach. Peru believes that it is of particular importance to discuss how we might foster the universality of the statute and what obstacles lie in the way of achieving that. Moreover, turning to a different matter now, measures taken against court officials as they carry out their mandate are unacceptable. Peru, again, reiterates its steadfast support of the court and all of its staff. We have to make sure we would call on all states parties to continue defending together the principles and values that are enshrined in the statute. And lastly, I would like to say that we need to continue working for better geographical representation in the staff of the court. We should seek to foster diversity and inclusion amongst the original groups that are part of the Rome Statute system. Madam President, Peru is aware of the fact that for the court to be able to carry out its job, and in order to address the constant challenges it faces, it is vital for it to have adequate financing. Unfortunately, we believe that it's important to stress the importance of responsible, sensible, efficient, and measured management of the financial resources given to the court by the member states. We also underscore the efforts of the Secretariat in this area, and we greatly appreciate the work done by the Ambassador of Guatemala, who is the facilitator for the budget in the ICC, and a series of negotiations that have been underway in order to come up with a budget of 2025 that will make it possible for the court to address all of its needs. To conclude, Madam President, once again, let me again reiterate our thanks to the judges, the prosecutor's office, the registrar and the registry, the staff of the court for their constant dedication. We'd also like to say that we greatly appreciate the input from the civil society institutes that work alongside the court, trying to achieve a world in which justice and peace may prevail. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement, and the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Godfred Yeboah Dame, Attorney General and Minister of Justice of Ghana. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I bring you warm greetings from the President of the Republic of Ghana, and I convey Ghana's appreciation to Her Excellency Ambassador Pivy Kalkoranta and the Peru for the sterling leadership they have provided state parties during her tenure and throughout the year for the diligent work done in guiding the proceedings of the 23rd session of the Assembly of State Parties to the Rome Statute. I assure you of the full support of my delegation for a successful conference. My appreciation also goes to the President of the Court, Judge Tomoko Akani, and to the Secretariat for the excellent work done in the management of affairs of the court. Ghana cherishes and remains committed to the principles and ideals of the Rome Statute for addressing the grievous crimes of concern to the international community, thereby deterring perpetrators of same. We will continue to work closely with the court through its organs to ensure the full realization of the ends of justice and accountability. Since inception, the International Criminal Court has helped deliver justice to some victims around the world, to deter the most reprehensible atrocities and promote the norms of international criminal justice. Nonetheless, the court is still faced with challenges. Armed conflicts around the world present a real danger to the maintenance of international peace and security. The onset of new challenges behooves state parties and relevant stakeholders to invest efforts in order to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of the court. The commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute in New York and Syracuse was auspicious in enhancing visibility of the court while encouraging greater accession of non-state parties to the statute. Ghana welcomes Armenia's accession to the Rome Statute. We also look forward to Ukraine's accession to the statute in January 2025. Madam President, concerning Africa and the ICC, Ghana continues to advocate for dialogue and engagement in addressing the challenges the court is confronted with, particularly the strengthening of relations between the court and African states. We commend the court's activities in the Central African Republic and former President Hofmanns's working visit to Bangui to meet with community leaders and victims benefiting from the Trust Fund for Victims of Crimes of the Rome Statute. We call for more of such complementarity initiatives of the court and effective partnerships with local authorities in enhancing the capacity of national jurisdictions to deal with the most serious crimes of concern to the international community. Ghana holds the view that the best form of support for the ICC is by African nations consolidating democracy in their jurisdictions and avoiding conditions suggestive of impunity, calling for the intervention of the ICC. When democracy reigns and is practiced in its true form, with the citizens feeling a sense of fulfillment of the entitlements of citizenship, free expression, security, adherence to constitutionally stipulated terms for government without an attempt to manipulate same, concerns about the commission of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and impunity in general will be non-existent. Conditions which attract the interest of the ICC will necessarily be eliminated. Further, the pure practice of democracy in Africa enjoins the establishment of sound systems of justice and the creation of facilities for the investigation and trial of cases of interest to the ICC. This, without a doubt, is in line with the declared objective of the ICC as it fosters the principle of complementarity enshrined in the Rome Statute. We commend the court and state parties for their collaborative efforts at deepening cooperation and complementarity in favor of justice for the victims of atrocities. My delegation affirms the need for effective operationalization of the principle of complementarity in furtherance of the full realization of the objectives of the frameworks of the Rome Statute at the national level. The primacy of national jurisdiction over the prosecution of crime requires the occurrence of two things. First, all states must have strong and effective legal and judicial systems for investigating and prosecuting international crimes, as the ICC by itself lacks the capacity to investigate and prosecute all international crimes committed in the territories of states. Second, domestic legislations of African countries must recognize war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide as specific offenses. This may be achieved either through the domestication of the Rome Statute into our laws, so that national courts assume jurisdiction over offenses created by the Rome Statute, or the passage of a specific legislation affirming the creation of such offenses with punishment duly prescribed according to international standards and the forum for punishment of same within our respective domestic jurisdictions duly stipulated. Ghana welcomes the opening of preliminary investigations to several situations outside the African continent by the court and the establishment of the Office of the OTP abroad. This development and its visible outcomes could help dispel the perception that the court unduly concentrates on Africa, especially as international crimes under the statute know no geographical boundaries. The court must be seen to have its searchlight everywhere and be responsive to war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, and the crimes of aggression committed anywhere without equivocation. In the wake of the recent cyber and political threats to the security of the court, my delegation wishes to register its unflinching support for the independence of the court and the measures taken in protection of the court's staff and documents. Further, we call on all state parties to the Rome Statute to stand together in unity and with one voice in defense of the courts and its officials at all levels. Ghana commends the enduring words of the President of the Court, Judge Tomaku Akani, in her address to the UN General Assembly that, and I quote, "The court is only bound by the law and will not change the course of its actions due to threats, be they political or of another nature, and that the court will continue abiding by its mandate undeterred with integrity, determination, impartiality, and independence at all times." End of quote. Madam President, Ghana commends the report on the review of the Secretariat, the work of the review mechanism, and working groups on the cluster of issues of governance, cooperation, and complementarity, the rules and procedures of the court, as well as investigations and prosecutions. My delegation lauds the group of independent experts for their efforts and submission of their comprehensive report and the work of the independent oversight mechanisms. It is our hope that state parties, focal points, specialized working groups, organs of the court, and all stakeholders would keep up the momentum for the effective implementation of the recommendations to ensure that the review process is successful in enhancing the efficient performance of the court and the Rome Statute system. My delegation also wishes to stress the importance of ensuring fairness and equity in the recruitment of staff of the court in as wide geographical and gender balanced basis as possible, based on the highest standards of efficiency, competence, and integrity. This will no doubt give equal opportunity to competent nationals of all state parties to bring their varied experiences and perspectives to bear on the court, to enhance institutional efficiency while ensuring impartiality in the workings of the court. In this respect, we look forward to the effective implementation of the moratorium on recruitment of candidates from non-state parties and the new tenure policy of the court. I acknowledge the support of the International Criminal Court in the activities of the African Center of International Criminal Justice at the Gimpa Law School in Ghana. The center, established in May 2017, is dedicated to the promotion of international criminal law and justice in Africa and the world through research, capacity building, seminars, and advocacy. The visit of former President Hofmanski to to the center in September 2022, and that of the ICC prosecutor Karim Khan in October 2024 for the delivery of the third eminent lecture on international criminal justice at the center are testament to the continuing invaluable contribution and commitment to the court to the objectives of the center. I conclude, Madam President, by expressing my delegation's profound appreciation to the government and people of the Royal Kingdom of the Netherlands for their continued support in hosting the court in The Hague. I thank you for your attention. God bless us all.
I thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Lateef Fagbemi, Attorney General of the Minister of Justice of Nigeria. You have the floor.
Thank you.
Microphone.
To confronting impunity, upholding perpetrators of heinous crimes accountable, and restoring justice for victims. This commitment is essential to creating a safer and more just world, and Nigeria fully supports the court in its tireless efforts to fulfill its mandate. We remain committed to this noble cause, particularly in the areas of thorough documentation and the prosecution of the world's most heinous crimes. Madam President, the international law continues to grapple with the balance between state sovereignty and global justice. In addition to traditional concerns, modern challenges such as environmental degradation, autonomous weaponry, and cyber warfare increasingly threaten civilian population. These emerging threats require collective response, and it is vital that we recognize civilian infrastructure as essential to human survival during armed conflict, ensuring such entities are protected. Now more than ever before is the time to inspire trust in the international legal system, reinforcing its role as a pillar of global security and justice. Since 2010, the ICC has been conducting preliminary examination into alleged crimes in Nigeria. While we respect the court's mandate to intervene when states are unable and unwilling to prosecute such crimes, it is important to emphasize that there must be respect for the principles of complementarity. Our nation has consistently demonstrated both the will and capacity to investigate and prosecute serious crimes, including but not limited to Boko Haram and other terrorist groups. We are proud of the Nigerian Army, which has systems and structures in place to ensure their operations are guided by international humanitarian law and human rights principles. The 22nd session of this assembly, Nigeria reported the establishment of an independent special investigative panel by the National Human Rights Commission to address allegations against the Nigerian military by Reuters. After thorough investigation spanning 8 months, the panel found no evidence to substantiate these claims. The allegations of killing, torture, and recruitment of underage fighters have been proved to be false and exaggerated. Indeed, the work of the panel and acceptance of its recommendations by the government clearly indicates that Nigeria has the political will to investigate allegations of heinous crimes and hold violators accountable. Madam President, the conduct of military operations during conflict is regulated by international humanitarian law, and we can assure this Assembly that the Nigerian military does not engage in arbitrary killings or inhuman treatment of those no longer directly participating in hostilities. Our military ensures that captured combatants are treated with dignity and respect. While inadvertent mistakes or errors of judgment may occur in chaos of conflict, these are promptly investigated by impartial commissions and panels. I wish to state that Nigeria has a well-established and functional martial system for holding erring officers accountable. We also employ restorative justice measures, including compensations where appropriate. In addition, Nigeria's 6-month demobilization, de-radicalization, and reintegration DDR program has successfully integrated 4,000 former Boko Haram combatants into society. We will continue to prioritize the training and retraining of our armed forces, ensuring that human rights and international law remain at the forefront of our military operations, with a focus on protection of civilian population. As a responsible state party to the Rome Statute, Nigeria has consistently engaged with the Office of the Prosecutor, demonstrating our military adherence to international humanitarian law and ensuring accountability for any personnel found guilty of misconduct. Despite these efforts, we are concerned by the seemingly determined stance of the Office of the Prosecutor regarding our armed forces and the situation in Nigeria. We are also concerned about the activities of apologists of terrorist groups parading as civilian organizations who are continuously making unsubstantiated allegations in order to undermine legitimate efforts of the Nigerian armed forces. Nigeria will formally request that the Office of the Prosecutor bring an end to this prolonged process, which has now lasted for 14 years. The continued preliminary investigation is damaging to Nigerians' reputation and undermines the morale of our law enforcement and military personnel who work tirelessly to combat terrorism and insurgency, ensure safety of lives and properties, and bring justice and succor to the victims of terrorism. Nigeria calls on all state parties to ratify the Convention on Cluster Munition and the use of cluster munitions as cause of widespread suffering and hinder peace building and humanitarian efforts. In conclusion, Nigeria stands firm with fellow state parties in the shared commitment to ending impunity for the world's most serious crimes. We fully support the work of the ICC and encourage those state parties yet to accede to the Rome Statutes to do so. Madam President, esteemed delegates, I want to thank you for this audience. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. And next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Martin Smolek, Director General for Legal and Consular Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic. You have the floor.
Madam President, Czechia supports the statement as will be delivered on behalf of the European Union and its member states, and wishes to add few remarks in its national capacity. Let me appreciate the very recent ratification of the Rome Statute by Ukraine, who will become the 125th state party as of the first day of the upcoming year. The ratification marks an important progress in achieving accountability for the crimes committed in connection with aggression of Russia against Ukraine. It is a piece of accountability mosaic which we strive to complete by establishing a special tribunal for the crime of aggression committed against Ukraine. The ratification of the Rome Statute by Ukraine highlights the complementarity nature of the ICC and the purported special tribunal. In this regard, we should not settle for the argument that the ICC jurisdiction worldwide for the crime of aggression has been limited. We, state parties, will have a unique opportunity to harmonize the ICC's jurisdiction for all the core crimes during the next year's review conference. It should be put clearly that the crime of aggression, as the mother of all crimes, is often the first international crime leading to commission of the other crimes, and as such deserves the same jurisdictional limitations. Madam President, we note the unprecedented workload of the ICC. The ICC is a court of last resort based on the principle of complementarity. Its heavy workload serves as evidence of its irreplaceable position in the fight against impunity for crimes under international law. At the same time, its close cooperation with all stakeholders active in the system of the rule of law is vital in order to support accountability efforts. The policy on complementarity and cooperation launched by the Office of the Prosecutor is therefore one meaningful example of deepening the engagement with national authorities and other stakeholders in situation countries. By creating synergies of cooperation, both the national criminal systems and the court will benefit. I thank you.
I thank you for your statement, and I will give floor to next speaker, Her Excellency Ms. Melita Kapric, Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs of Slovenia. You have the floor. Thank you.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Slovenia fully aligns itself with the statement by the European Union and its member states and would like to further contribute to the general debate in the national capacity. Let me begin by reiterating our unwavering support for the ICC as an international judicial institution tasked with safeguarding the core values of the international community. To fully realize their potential, judicial institutions must remain free from any interference in their independence and impartial work. Therefore, it is our firm belief that the ICC must uphold its mandate by applying the law equally in all cases, regardless of political considerations, and establish beyond a reasonable doubt the accountability of every perpetrator without selectivity. The ICC is a cornerstone of international peace and security, relying on the active commitment and full cooperation of states parties who are obligated to provide such cooperation. As demonstrated repeatedly, the majority of the international community shares common values in the fight against impunity. Experience has shown that respectful, inclusive, and constructive dialogue and cooperation among stakeholders are not only possible, but also in the mutual interest of all. I want to emphasize the need to protect the ICC from cyber attacks, interference, attempts to discredit it, and threats or sanctions of any kind. In particular, the protection of selected officials, staff, and all persons cooperating with the court is essential. Slovenia also acknowledges the valuable and tireless contributions of civil society in the fight against impunity. Madam President, as victims are at the heart of the Rome Statute, Slovenia reaffirms its commitment to recognizing their rights and providing them with assistance. We call on states parties and other stakeholders to contribute to the trust funds for victims. To meet the expectations of states parties in the pursuit of justice, the court must have sufficient resources to carry out its activities effectively in a balanced way and in all situations. Sustainable and predictable funding is crucial for this purpose. We commend Armenia for recently becoming a state party, and we look forward to Ukraine's accession. Slovenia calls on all states parties to ratify the amendments to the Rome Statute. Ahead of next year's review of the Kampala amendments on aggression, Slovenia calls on state parties to engage in the review process and consider harmonizing the ICC's jurisdiction over all 4 core crimes, strengthening the protection of states against acts of aggression. To enhance international legal cooperation in the investigation and prosecution of international crimes, and to strengthen national capacities, Slovenia encourages all states to consider signing and ratifying the Ljubljana-The Hague Convention. Finally, Slovenia extends its sincere gratitude to Mr. Renan Vilases for his many years of dedicated service as director of the Secretariat and to his devoted team in supporting state parties and ICC organs and contributing to the court's successes. In conclusion, Slovenia reiterates its strong support for the ICC and its role as an independent judicial institution. Thank you for your attention.
I thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is Her Excellency Ms. Henrika Moskvicz-Ardenys, Undersecretary of State, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates. Let me start by offering my congratulations, first of all, to the President, the Vice Presidents, the new judges of the Court, the new President and Vice Presidents of the Assembly of State Parties on assuming your duties. We'll keep your fingers crossed. And also let me underline that Poland aligns itself with the European Union's statement made on behalf of its member states and would like to add also some remarks in our national capacity. First of all, let me share how Poland supports the Court's work through active participation in the ICC's management. I would like to mention just a few areas. We are currently a member of the Bureau, determined to play a constructive role in both the The Hague and New York's working groups, and through our ambassador to the Netherlands, we hold the Vice Presidency of the Assembly of State Parties. Being fully aware of the role of voluntary agreements between the state parties and the Court, we negotiated an agreement on the enforcement of ICC sentences, which I'm happy to announce that will be signed tomorrow by our Deputy Minister of Justice. Madam President, Excellencies, just over a month ago, we discussed the Court's annual report at the UN General Assembly. In this brief period, the tally of victims from conflicts around the world has again risen considerably. The Court's role and responsibility to seek justice for those victims, especially the most innocent ones, has increased in equal measure. Recent ICC decisions testify to the Court's determination to try fairly the perpetrators of the gravest international crimes within its jurisdiction, regardless of where these crimes take place or the rank of the perpetrators. The international community, especially the community of state parties, looks at the ICC with hope that it will be equal to the tasks before it. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, state parties state in solidarity against all attacks and other actions aimed at derailing the ICC's judicial activities. The recent past has furnished plenty of examples of such an obstruction, and unfortunately, more loom on the horizon. If they occur, let us do all we can to counter these attempts to disrupt the Court and the international justice, ensuring the security of prosecutors, of judges, ICC staff and witnesses, so that we can do our work free from threats, pressure, security concerns, and if a serious challenge arises, we shall not let's say, lose our determination. Faced with such external threats, the ICC should also take all possible measures to bolster its internal ethical standards, along with international organizational resilience, thereby, when irregularities occur, ensuring prompt, impartial, and effective investigation. The court should not provide its critics with additional arguments. There is a saying, it should be like Caesar's wife, above all suspicion. Dear delegates, Russia's invasion of Ukraine was a reminder of the accountability gap in the Rome Statute, since ICC's jurisdiction over the crime of aggression is severely limited. Poland believes that this gap should be closed. Genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression must be treated and prosecuted equally. This could be achieved by simply removing the current restrictions on the crime of aggression. The upcoming review of the Kampala amendments in 2025 shall offer a good opportunity to do so. Poland is ready to work with partners to make this project a reality. Excellencies, state parties have justifiably high expectations towards the ICC, but this in turn implies the obligation to ensure appropriate conditions for the court to operate. The ICC shall be free from outside pressure, from threats or attacks. Moreover, a comprehensive budget shall serve the purpose of active and effective ICC handlings. Having said that, I trust that in the coming days we will find a consensus on the court's financial framework. Finally, it is essential that state parties work together with the court, including by complying with its decisions, especially when it comes to the execution of arrest warrants. Implementing the idea of international criminal justice requires cooperation even against one's political interests or preferred political choices. Universal application of international criminal justice leads to its ultimate success. Therefore, Poland welcomes Ukraine's accession to the statute and appeals to all states not yet parties to it to consider joining. Only by acting together can we ensure a strict and efficient system of criminal justice in a rule-based international order. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is Ms. Lauma Baikana, Deputy Minister of Justice of Latvia. You have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, I'm honored to address the Assembly of States Parties on behalf of Latvia. First, I would like to commend the dedicated service of the President of the Assembly, the President of the Court, the esteemed judges, and the Office of the Prosecutor. Latvia remains unwavering in its support for the International Criminal Court and the principles and values enshrined in the Rome Statute. Second, as a current member of the Bureau, we are particularly honored to collaborate with our fellow members in the preparatory work of the Assembly. We further extend our gratitude to the President of the Assembly and the Secretariat for their significant efforts in ensuring the excellent preparation of the 23rd session of the Assembly. Madam President, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine remains a grave threat to the international rules-based order. We commend the court for issuing of arrest warrants for high-ranking Russian officials allegedly responsible for serious crimes in this context. These actions underscore the commitment to uphold international law and ensure accountability for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. We encourage the court to persist in its efforts to bring all perpetrators to justice, reinforcing the principles of justice and human rights globally. Latvia is committed to the court's goal of ending impunity and hold accountable perpetrators regardless of their official position of war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity and crimes of aggression. However, this goal cannot be achieved without the full participation of state parties and adherence to their obligations. In this regard, it is important to remind all state parties of their duty to cooperate fully with the court in its investigations and prosecutions. Concerning cooperation, we express our gratitude to the Office of the Prosecutor, European Union member states and the United States for their involvement in the Eurojust joint investigation team addressing alleged core international crimes committed in Ukraine, as well as their contributions to the International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression. Additionally, we must support the establishment of a special tribunal for Ukraine, and we recognize that the adoption of the Vienna-Riga Statement is a step closer to bringing perpetrators of the crime of aggression to justice. Collectively, we play a crucial role in the global fight against impunity. The court must be able to work independently and impartially, free from the outside interference. Latvia therefore deplores any instances of non-compliance and activities that hinder the court's ability to fulfill its mandate. Madam President, Latvia has been and will remain a strong supporter of the International Criminal Court. As a state party, we have actively contributed to the court's work by providing additional financial contributions and seconding experts to assist the Office of the Prosecutor. Latvia places significant importance on contributing to the Trust Fund for Victims, ensuring that those suffering from mass atrocities receive the necessary support. Therefore, we are in the process of approving another voluntary contribution to the Trust Fund. We call upon all states to make financial contributions and offer additional support to the court in the fight against impunity. Furthermore, we take this opportunity and invite all states that have not yet done so to accede to the Rome Statute and to ratify the Kampala amendments on the crime of aggression. All states should use the opportunity of the 2025 review conference of the Kampala amendments to expand the court's mandate and send a clear message that the most serious crimes of international concern shall not go unpunished. We join in congratulating Armenia on becoming the 124th state party to the Rome Statute, and Ukraine on depositing its instrument on ratification. Finally, Madam President, we are pleased to announce that on October 8 this year, the government approved the signing of the agreement between the Republic of Latvia and the International Criminal Court on the enforcement of sentences. This agreement underscores our commitment to international justice and its support for the court's mandate. We reaffirm our duty as state parties to persist in the battle against impunity, seeking justice and accountability for victims, both past and present. I thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Mungtushik Lakhanayev, State Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia. You have the floor.
Madam President, distinguished delegates, at the outset, I wish to extend our congratulations to you, Madam President, on your recent election to preside over the Assembly. We are confident that your leadership will contribute to our collective efforts towards a more just world. Mongolia, as a supporter of promoting universality of the Rome Statute, we welcome the ratification of the statute by Ukraine. Madam President, Mongolia remains committed to upholding the principles enshrined in the Rome Statute and stands for international justice, peace, and security, and the rule of law. We commend the ICC's contributions in promoting human rights and reinforcing the rule of law. Mongolia, as an advocate for justice, joined the ICC, endorsing its establishment as a permanent institution dedicated to upholding its principles. We envisioned an ICC that would function as a court of law, one that upholds due process, impartiality, and respect for international legal norms. We acknowledge with concern the growing disagreements surrounding interpretations, applications of core principles by the court, which have raised questions regarding its impartiality in preliminary examinations, investigations, prosecutions, and trials. Madam President, concerning the recent ICC's decisions regarding Mongolia, we strongly disagree with the legal reasoning underpinning these decisions. All arguments must be considered thoroughly. Mongolia was not heard fully. In this regard, earlier today, we have formally submitted requests for reconsideration to the pre-trial chamber, expressing our hope the chamber will revisit its decision based on its inherent powers. We emphasize that the integrity of proceedings, procedural justice, and the impartiality of judges are essential to ensuring fairness and upholding the principles enshrined in the Rome Statute. Madam President, the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court is a landmark treaty that has laid the foundation for addressing the most serious crimes of international concern. In the pursuit of justice and accountability, we stand at a crucial juncture. In recent years, the ICC has taken multiple approaches, weakening established tenets of public international law and the ICC's own legitimacy, credibility, and authority. Questions surrounding the court's impartiality are likely to generate concerns about its ability to deliver justice consistently. It is evident that we must undertake a comprehensive review of the statute to address its shortcomings and ensure its effectiveness and implementation. This review should focus on enhancing cooperation among states parties, clarifying procedural ambiguities, and ensuring that the ICC can implement its mandate in all circumstances. We believe that the strength of the ICC lies not only in its legal framework, but also in our collective will to support it. It is our responsibility to strengthen this institution so that it can fulfill its promise. In these challenging times, Mongolia has continued to support the ICC, recognizing the importance of a legal mechanism to uphold the rule of law and to protect international peace and security. Mongolia is deeply concerned about the growing security threats faced by the court, particularly in light of recent cyber attacks and the targeting of its officials. We express our solidarity with the ICC and its presidency as they confront these challenges. We also acknowledge that it is indeed crucial that the ICC continues to cooperate with the United Nations and its member states, which is essential to the court's effective functioning. Madam President, distinguished delegates, the ICC was founded on the principles of justice, fairness, and respect for international law. It is our shared responsibility to ensure that these principles are upheld. Let us work together to address these challenges and reaffirm our commitment to a court that honors the delicate balance between justice, peace, security, and stability. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement, and the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Daniel Horczegi Zligali Landbeck, Ambassador of Hungary to the Netherlands on behalf of the European Union. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. As current EU presidency, I am honored to address the Assembly of States Parties on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The candidate countries North Macedonia, Montenegro, the Republic of Moldova, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Georgia, San Marino align themselves with this statement. In this capacity, I would like to congratulate the new President of the Assembly, the new President of the Court, as well as the judges elected during the last session of the Assembly. We wish them every success and assure them our steadfast support. The conflicts affecting several countries all around the world demonstrate how our aspirations for peace and justice can be shattered at any time and how ensuring accountability is more crucial than ever. The European Union and its member states reiterate their full support to the International Criminal Court and reaffirm their commitment to promote the principles and values of the Rome Statute. In its endeavour to carry out its mandate independently and impartially, regrettably the court faces threats, intimidations and pressure against it. The European Union and its member states condemn any attacks or threats, including threats of sanctions, against the court, elected officials, personnel, and those cooperating with the court as unacceptable attempts at influencing their actions and the court's independent investigations and impartial judicial proceedings. The European Union will continue to provide its full support and contribution to ensure the protection of the court and its staff against its external pressures or threats. The ICC plays a central role in the global fight against impunity. In line with the principle of complementarity, all situations under its jurisdiction, where the most serious crimes of concern to the international community appear to have been committed, deserve the court's attention. We commend the efforts and the significant process of work of the court over the past year, particularly at a time of increased workload and challenging operational environment. We also welcome the Office of the Prosecutor's new policies on children, gender-based crimes, and complementarity and cooperation. Madam President, we call on all states to follow up on their obligations to cooperate with the court to put an end to the impunity for the gravest international crimes. In particular, we call on the states parties to adhere to their obligations to cooperate in line with the Rome Statute and to double efforts to identify the new avenues for strengthened cooperation with the court, which is essential for the court to fulfill its mandate, including the execution of outstanding arrest warrants. In this regard, we deplore any instance of non-compliance with obligation to cooperate and recall that non-compliance prevents the courts from exercising its functions. We call on all states parties to avoid non-essential contacts with suspects under ICC arrest warrants. As the court's workload continues to increase, we cannot expect it to fulfill its mandate without adequate capacities. We therefore urge all states parties to provide the ICC with appropriate financial resources. We welcome progress made in relation to the independent expert review of the court, including on the implementation of a tenure policy. We encourage the ICC and states parties to continue working on the implementation of the recommendations of the independent experts. The European Union and its member states place particular importance on a healthy work culture that ensures inclusion, geographical representation, and gender equality. In this regard, we emphasize the importance of the court's zero-tolerance policy towards harassment, discrimination, abuse of authority, and other misconduct, and of addressing any allegations and concerns with transparency and fairness. At the heart of all efforts in pursuit of truth, justice and accountability stand the victims and survivors. We also call on states, parties and others to contribute to the Trust Fund of Victims, as it plays an essential role in ensuring that thousands of victims receive reparations and assistance. We also urge all states parties to support and protect human rights defenders and civil society organizations who work to bring justice to victims. Madam President, to succeed in the global fight against impunity, the ICC must become universal. We welcome Armenia as the new state party and we congratulate Ukraine for depositing its instrument of ratification of the Rome Statute and thus becoming a new state party of the ICC as of 1st of January 2025. We also encourage Ukraine to ensure swift implementation of the Rome Statute. The EU will renew its efforts to encourage the widest possible participation in the Rome Statute and to preserve its integrity, together with states, parties, international and regional organizations, as well as civil society. States parties need to adopt effectively national legislation to implement the Rome Statute and to reinforce their national capacities. The role of the ICC is to complement, not to replace, existing national judicial systems. Recognizing the importance of international cooperation and national capacity building to achieve more effective mutual legal assistance, the European Union also encourages states to consider signing and ratifying the Ljubljana, the Hague Convention on International Cooperation in the investigation and prosecution of the crime of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes and other international crimes. The European Union further invites states parties, having taken into account their national circumstances, to consider ratifying or accepting the Rome Statute's amendments and calls states parties to engage in the review of the Kampala amendments on aggression. Furthermore, the EU invites states parties to consider ratifying the agreement on privileges and immunities, especially in light of the increasing threats, intimidation and pressure the court and its personnel are facing. Madam President, the European Union and its member states will continue calling for the perpetrators of the most serious crimes to be brought to justice and held to account. No one, no matter who they are or where they are, must be allowed to escape justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your statement on behalf of the European Union. And my next speaker is Ms. Wiebke Rückert, Deputy Legal Advisor and Director for Public International Law in the Federal Foreign Office of Germany. You have the floor.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'm honored to address the Assembly of States Parties on behalf of the Federal Republic of Germany. Germany fully aligns itself with the statement just presented on behalf of the European Union. Please allow me to also address some points in our national capacity. At the outset, Germany wishes to commend you, Madam President, for your leadership and the entire team for the excellent preparation of the Assembly in these challenging times. The preamble of the Rome Statute reminds us, and I quote, that during this century, millions of children, women and men have been victims of unimaginable atrocities that deeply shock the conscience of humanity, unquote, and that such grave crimes threaten peace and security. This statement in the preamble refers to the 20th century, but it sadly holds true for the 21st century as well. The preamble does not end at deploring the status quo, however. It goes on to affirm the state's determination to put an end to impunity for the perpetrators of these crimes. Madam President, a quarter of a century after its foundation, and more than 20 years after the ICC effectively came into operation, our determination as states parties matters more than at probably any time before. Our determination matters because we are witnessing increased pressure on the court. For us, as its founders and states parties, this is the time to stand in support of the court. It is the time to stand for its independence and to stand behind its personnel. As states parties, we have agreed on the rules, principles, and procedures in the court statute. We have agreed on a permanent institution with the power to exercise its jurisdiction over persons for the most serious crimes of international concern. This was a great civilizational achievement. Germany's support for the court remains firm. Our determination matters, secondly, as 2025 will witness the mandated review of the Kampala amendments on the crime of aggression. Kampala was a great achievement in that it established the definition of the crime of aggression and a jurisdictional regime which was later activated by this assembly. The time that we agreed upon to revisit this regime is coming up now. Thank you, Madam President, and thank you also Belgium as focal point for working to ascertain the preferences of states parties as to the time and place of the mandated review conference. Germany looks forward to the formal agreement at this Assembly of States Parties to schedule the review conference in accordance with these preferences for July 2025 in New York. Let us make 2025 count in the pursuit to end impunity for the crime of aggression. And our determination matters, thirdly, with a view to endowing the court with the financial means that it needs to fulfill its tasks. All over the world, states are experiencing a time of fiscal difficulty. And this, of course, needs to be taken into account. Yet at the same time, the court's needs in this challenging time have to be met. Germany believes that the CBF proposal provides a very valuable orientation. In particular, we are convinced that a certain budget increase is needed in order to enable the court to set up its cybersecurity properly so that it is able to withstand any future attacks. Madam President, distinguished delegates, Germany has been a staunch supporter of the court from its inception. We have been and continue to be a major contributor financially, both to the general budget and to the Trust Fund for Victims and its important work. We're promoting knowledge of international criminal law through the Nuremberg Principles Academy. Let us strengthen together this court in every possible way at a time when it is so badly needed and when it so clearly needs our support. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is Her Excellency Ms. Susanna Gordon, Ambassador of New Zealand to the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, tēnā koutou katoa, greetings from New Zealand. As the first and only permanent international criminal court, New Zealand considers the court plays a critical role in investigating allegations of serious international crimes and in ending impunity for such crimes. And the relevance and importance of our court is unquestioned. New Zealand warmly welcomes and celebrates Armenia and Ukraine becoming the 124th and the 125th states parties of the statute. We commend the substantial work the court has accomplished this year concerning conflicts and alleged crimes across 4 continents. We especially acknowledge the role that the Office of the Prosecutor, the Judiciary and the Registry play in this work, working in partnership with states parties. We offer our thanks and we express our confidence in the prosecutor, the deputy prosecutors and their teams for their dedicated investigatory work and service to the court and its mandate. Investigations continue in 12 situations, including in Darfur, in Mali, in Ukraine and in the state of Palestine. We continue to follow closely investigations into the situations in our own Indo-Pacific region, the Philippines and in Bangladesh and Myanmar. The cooperation, assistance and support of all states remains essential to the court's operations and fulfilment of its independent and impartial mandate. States parties are required to cooperate with the court, including by facilitating the arrest and surrender to the court of perpetrators of the most serious crimes of concern. We are concerned by one state's party's recent non-compliance with its obligations under the Rome Statute. New Zealand also reiterates our call on all states, whether or not they are party to the Rome Statute, to support the court's important work towards international justice and accountability, and we call on all countries who have not yet done so to ratify or accede to the Rome Statute. Madam President, New Zealand is concerned about the number of threats facing the court. It is unacceptable that some have threatened elected officials and personnel of the court and threatened court systems. In June, New Zealand endorsed a joint statement reaffirming our shared commitment to preserve the court's integrity from political interference and pressure. New Zealand stands by those statements. And it is also unacceptable that the court has experienced cyber attacks and other attempts at infiltration and intimidation. As part of our support for the court as an independent and impartial judicial institution, New Zealand provided support for the court's Security Trust Fund. Ensuring the court is safe, secure and resilient is critical to ensuring that the work to end impunity continues at pace. And we thank the Netherlands for its consistent support as host state in this regard. We trust that the court will not be deterred from pursuing its vital mandate. Madam President, New Zealand supports a well-run court. We thank the Registrar and his team for their work to ensure all pillars of the court have the support they need to do their work. We remain focused on ensuring the court is sufficiently resourced to enable it to continue undertaking its investigations and prosecutions independently and impartially. We support a regular budget that is reasonable, justified and fiscally responsible. And at the same time, we recognise the fiscal constraints facing many states parties and the need for this reality to be reflected in the court's planning and operations. We thank the Committee on Budget and Finance for its guidance in the lead up to this year's Assembly, and we look forward to agreeing a budget by consensus. New Zealand has supported the work of the review mechanism. This mechanism has ensured the recommendations of the independent experts review are addressed. While this work will now be mainstreamed, we must keep working on the challenges identified, including on ensuring a positive workplace culture. The states parties must work alongside the court in this. New Zealand strongly supports the important work of the Trust Fund for Victims. We commend the fund for its efforts this year, delivering real and meaningful sense of justice to thousands of victims, their families and their communities. We encourage other states to consider supporting the Trust Fund through a reasonable regular budget and through voluntary contributions. Separately, New Zealand also takes this opportunity to note our support to continue discussions about serious environmental damage and destruction at a global level. Finally, let me finish by quoting my Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon. He said, "It is critical for New Zealand that the rules-based system is upheld. New Zealand supports international law and the International Criminal Court as a critical part of that infrastructure." So, Madam Chair, we put this support into concrete action, including through our role as a pragmatic and constructive Bureau member. We look forward to serving all states parties in this capacity for the remainder of our term on the Bureau. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Ambassador Engelmann Teuermann, Ambassador of Austria to the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Austria fully aligns itself with the statement just delivered by the European Union. In addition, we would like to highlight the following points. Austria recognizes and supports the International Criminal Court as the primary institution at the international level to hold those responsible for the worst atrocity crimes in all regions of the world. While we might not always be of the same opinion as the court, we will fulfill our legal obligations under the Rome Statute. Madam President, over the last year, important progress has been made in strengthening the Rome system. In particular, we welcome the 4 additional arrest warrants that have been issued this year in the context of the Ukraine investigation against officials at the highest level of the Russian armed forces. An important aspect in this regard is the meticulous collection of evidence and information from witnesses and victims, to which also the Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine, hosted in Vienna, contributes. Madam President, despite the progress that has been made over the past year, we have not achieved universality of the Rome Statute yet. We commend Ukraine for depositing its instrument of ratification and welcome it as the 125th state party as of 1st of January 2025. We also warmly welcome Armenia as a new state party. We call on all others to join the Rome Statute system and make justice of universal value for all. We commend the court and its staff for its unwavering commitment to its mission, despite the increasing intensity of threats it faces, including the threat of sanctions and unfounded arrest warrants against judges and attacks, including on the court's IT infrastructure. Austria strongly denounces these attempts to compromise the practical functioning of the court and to intimidate its staff. We will work with the court and all states parties to protect this important institution. We must ensure that the court can continue to effectively, independently, and impartially investigate and try perpetrators of atrocity crimes. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the registrar and his team for taking the necessary steps to ensure the functioning and safety of the court and its staff, and for working transparently and constructively with all states parties. Madam President, for the court to effectively implement its mandate, it needs to be equipped with adequate resources. In addition to states parties' assessed contributions, Austria welcomes the opportunity to provide the court with additional resources through voluntary contributions. Austria is pleased to have contributed this year to the Trust Fund for Victims, the Special Fund for Relocations, and the new Trust Fund for Complementarity. The court also depends on the expertise and dedication of its staff. We owe it to the staff to have a positive, respectful, and enabling work environment. The court's zero-tolerance policy against harassment, discrimination, abuse of authority, and other misconduct must be put into practice on a daily basis. To this end, we must also look into the existing oversight mechanisms with a view to ensuring that they are trusted by all staff and can effectively investigate and sanction misconduct, irrespective of the rank and status of those concerned. Madam President, despite the many immediate challenges the court faces, we must not forget its basic mission, namely to bring those responsible for atrocity crimes to justice. However, there is still a jurisdictional gap in the Rome Statute when it comes to the crime of aggression. Austria is looking forward to next year's review of the Kampala amendments on the crime of aggression. Austria stands ready to work together with all states parties to achieve a practical solution with a view to harmonizing the jurisdiction of the court across all 4 atrocity crimes. We welcome a short 3-day special session of the ASP in the beginning of July next year. The preparatory work should take place in an intensive manner from now on, including through at least monthly meetings of the Working Group on Amendments in New York. Madam President, apart from the important high-profile investigations and cases of the court, so many of its activities take place that make equally important contributions to international criminal justice, but many of those also go unnoticed. Its work with victims and affected communities, its cooperation with and support of local civil society, its collaboration with national law enforcement and prosecution authorities. Let us work together to protect, support, and strengthen the court across all of its activities to reach our common goal: accountability for perpetrators and justice for victims. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Franz Perez, Director General of the Directorate of International Law, Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland. You have the floor.
Thanks. Madame President, current affairs place the International Criminal Court more than ever at the center of attention. This demonstrates the importance of this institution in the multilateral architecture, but it also puts it under pressure. As states parties, we have a crucial role to play to defend the court and reinforce the system of the Rome Statute. That is the raison d'être of this assembly. My delegation would like to address 4 specific points. The first concerns the support to be given to the ICC. The court is an independent judicial body. This independence must be fiercely defended. Nevertheless, the court does depend on the support of states to be able to exercise its mandate. As states parties, it is up to us in the first place to support the ICC by fulfilling our obligations under the Rome Statute, starting with the obligation to cooperate with the court and to implement the arrest warrants. The court also needs our political support, particularly when it is subject to external pressure and security risks. Attacks against the independence of the court are also attacks against the rights of victims for truth and justice. We must not forget that in numerous situations, the court represents the only possibility for victims to obtain a certain degree of justice. States parties must be able to defend the ICC, to firmly condemn the threats and measures taken against court officials, and to constantly remind them of their support for the court as an independent judicial institution. It is a duty that we have taken very seriously over the 2 last years in our role as a focal point for the ICC within the Security Council with Japan, and we will continue to do so in the future. Secondly, I would like to stress the importance for the court of states showing coherence where it concerns their commitment to the court. Current affairs have shown us that more than ever we need the ICC in all regions of the world. The court is active in particular from Darfur to Ukraine, from Afghanistan to Myanmar, and it's currently involved in with the investigation in Israel and in the occupied Palestinian territory. It has to be said that the court has jurisdiction in each of these situations. It has, in particular, jurisdiction for the situation in Palestine, as well as for crimes committed in occupied Palestinian territory, as well as for crimes committed by Palestinian nationals also in Israel. With respect to the independence of the court, we don't comment on recent decisions on the arrest warrants. We stress, nevertheless, that the court decides on legal questions. It does not do politics, and as states parties, it is up to us to support the efforts of the court in this situation, as in others, respecting its independence and its impartiality. The third point that I would like to mention concerns the budget. Switzerland insists on the need to allocate sufficient resources to the court. Indeed, the fight against impunity cannot be carried out without adequate financial means. At the same time, we expect that the court will make the best usage of the means made available to it. The material support or the payment of voluntary contributions are certainly welcome, but they cannot be a substitute for the ordinary budget of the court, which must be sufficient in order to make it possible for it to carry out its mandate. Giving the court an adequate budget is primal responsibility of this Assembly. Madam President, by way of conclusion, I would like to stress that we have to continue our efforts with a view to reinforcing the Rome Statute, in particular where it concerns the crime of aggression. Indeed, the acts making up the crime of aggression continue to be perpetrated. and it is our responsibility to put into place an appropriate legal framework, making it possible to bring the perpetrators to justice. The victims have their rights. In order to obtain this objective, it seems necessary to harmonise the rules regarding jurisdiction of the ICC such that the crime of aggression can be prosecuted under the same conditions as other crimes under the Rome Statute. We welcome greatly the fact that the Bureau has decided to call a special session of the ASP in July 2025 in New York for the review of the amendments relating to the crime of aggression. And we now have to start the discussions without further ado, such that we can remove the obstacles from the court in exercising its jurisdiction for this crime of particular gravity. We are called upon to come up with concrete proposals within the framework of the working group on the amendments at the beginning of the year. Madam President, the ICC plays a crucial role in the defence and the promotion of the rule of law. It is a central institution in the fight against impunity and the search for justice. They are essential components of peace, security, and lasting reconciliation. The court deserves the support of states parties met together in the states. They have a fundamental role to play to enable the court to accomplish successfully the mandate which we have conferred onto it. The court is full of hope, and we can all contribute to the realization of that hope. I thank you.
Merci pour votre...
Thank you very much for your intervention.
Speaker is His Excellency Mr. Ararat Mirzoyan, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia. You have the floor.
Madam President of the Assembly, distinguished delegates, at the outset, I would like to congratulate the President of the Assembly for a successful year of leadership. Her efforts in guiding the state parties in these turbulent and challenging times are truly appreciated. It is the first time the representative of the Republic of Armenia addresses the session of the Assembly as a full-fledged member of the Rome Statute. So we are making our first steps on this path, but we are ready to play an active role here. The milestone decision to become a member of this august body was not an easy one. But having in mind the history of Armenia, we were firm in our belief that elimination of impunity, promotion of justice and accountability is of utmost importance, and that it can be achieved only by uniting our efforts. We believe that the International Criminal Court is an important element of the international law. It also enhances the development of international law and makes it more appropriate to present-day challenges. And perhaps most importantly, it delivers justice to the victims of atrocities, which is a vital element for peace and reconciliation. Therefore, Armenia fully acknowledges and accepts the responsibility to actively contribute to the strengthening and advancement of the court. Regrettably, the geography of the most serious international crimes is expanding, and technological developments unveil new methods and opportunities for committing them. It is imperative that like-minded countries spare no effort to prevent and punish the gravest crimes that challenge humanity: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and aggression. We have already witnessed too many instances when the early warning and early actions are undermined by narrow political interests, paralyzing effective functioning of international bodies directly responsible for maintenance and international peace and security. Maintenance of international peace and security. In this regard, strengthening the prevention mechanisms, such as early warning capabilities, along with the deterring potential of the international courts, in particular International Criminal Court, can lead us to a safer world. Only by reinforcing the global consensus and conviction that the most serious crimes are intolerable and that accountability is crucial for lasting and sustainable peace, we will ensure that justice is not a privilege for the few, but right for all. Armenia is ready to be very active in the processes of supporting regional and international collaboration to prevent impunity and strengthen adherence to international norms. We believe that a cooperative spirit among nations strengthens not only the ICC, but also our collective ability to uphold justice and the rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, as a long-standing supporter of the genocide prevention agenda, Armenia has been at the forefront of international action for strengthening of policies and practices against the crime of genocide, as well as building a global community network to advance the methods of prevention. Hence, Armenia initiated the Global Forum against the crime of genocide in regular observance of the International Day of the Victims of the Crime of Genocide and of the prevention of this crime, designated by the UN General Assembly resolution. Armenia is proud to be the penholder of that resolution. In conclusion, I would like to refer to the victim-centered nature of the ICC. We believe that victims deserve access to impartial justice, as the unpunished crimes lead to recurrence and repetition. In the context of supporting the victims, allow me to express a profound gratitude to the Trust Fund for Victims for supporting and implementing programs addressing the harms resulting from the Rome Statute crimes. And I thank you.
Thank you, Minister, very much for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Henko van der Kwast, Ambassador, Permanent Representative to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the International Criminal Court, and the Permanent Court of Arbitration of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by congratulating the new President of the Assembly, the new President and Vice Presidents of the Court, as well as the elected judges sworn in this year. We wish you every success in fulfilling your mandate and assure you of our steadfast support in these challenging times. History has taught us that never again, never forget is not enough. That is why the international community went beyond these words and created the Rome Statute. The Rome Statute has given a legal expression to the moral imperative that the most serious crimes that are known to mankind must not go unpunished. And it turned an aspiration into an institution. Since the statute entered into force in 2002, the number of state parties has more than doubled. Earlier this year, we welcomed Armenia as a new state party, and we are very honored that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia is here today with us in the ICC. We look forward to welcome Ukraine next year. The court currently unites 124 states from around the world in their ambition to end impunity and to provide justice for the victims of the gravest international crimes. Over the past 2 decades, the court has established itself as an indispensable pillar in the global fight against impunity. At the same time, many states have introduced major reforms to their domestic criminal law by implementing the Rome Statute. This has significantly improved their ability to try suspects of international crimes before their own national courts. That is in line with the principle of complementarity. The road to justice, therefore, leads not only to The Hague, but it leads increasingly to several reformed national institutions in capitals of the parties of the Rome Statute. Ladies and gentlemen, we all see the challenges the international legal order is currently facing. And the generation after the adoption of the Rome Statute, we stand on the eve of a defining period in the global fight against impunity. Like other institutions in our multilateral system, the International Criminal Court is likely to come under further pressure in the period ahead. Let's be clear about it. It is therefore now up to us all to go beyond pious words. As Rome State parties, we must protect the court and strengthen the Rome Statute system. I will mention a few key areas for concrete action by all of us. First, we must ensure full cooperation with the court, including by the execution of outstanding arrest warrants. We also call on all states not to deliberately undermine the arrest warrants of the court, nor the policy of the Assembly of State Parties to avoid non-essential contacts with persons against whom the court has issued arrest warrants. Second, we must protect the court. As a matter of principle, we believe that the independent organs of international courts and tribunals should be able to carry out their mandates without interference, threat, or intimidation. Any threats or attacks against the ICC, its information systems, its elected officials, or its personnel are therefore unacceptable. As the host state of the ICC, the Netherlands has unique responsibilities and legal obligations to ensure that the court can operate safely and independently. We are committed to fulfilling our obligations under the Headquarters Agreement, but it is ultimately a shared responsibility of all state parties of the court. It is also a shared interest of the state parties to do so, because allowing the integrity of the courts and tribunals to be undermined, that erodes the international rule of law, which is crucial for promoting global order and security and harms the legitimate interests of victims. Third, the court needs an adequate budget to enhance its security posture and to have the impact for which it was created. And finally, we need to strengthen the cooperation among states. Earlier this year, the Ljubljana-The Hague Convention was signed at the Peace Palace. This convention is a landmark treaty that will facilitate international cooperation in the domestic investigation and prosecution of international crimes. The Kingdom of the Netherlands invites all states to become parties to this convention. Ladies and gentlemen, we are convinced that the court, with the strong support of its state parties and the valuable contribution of civil society organizations, will be able to play a key role in enforcing international law. You can count on the unwavering support of the Netherlands, both in its capacity as host state and as a state party, in assisting the ICC in achieving its key objectives. I thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Titus Mwalo, Minister of Justice of Malawi. You have the floor.
Madam President, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I am Titus Mwalo, Minister of Justice for Malawi. I would like to start by expressing my sincere gratitude to you, Madam President, the Bureau, and the Secretariat for your excellent work in the preparation for this 23rd session of the Assembly of States Parties
ASP23. I wish to assure you, Madam President, of Malawi's cooperation and constructive engagement for the realization of the objectives of this meeting. Madam President, the ASP23 is being held at the time when the International Criminal Court continues to face external pressures in the form of threats of use of sanctions against its staff as it carries out an important and noble mandate of combating impunity for the most serious international crimes that shock the conscience of mankind. The states parties are even more required to stand with the court in these very difficult times by condemning in strongest possible terms any attempt to interfere with the work of the court. The court continues to be the pillar for ensuring accountability based on the principle of complementarity upon which the Rome Statute is premised, and cooperation with the court as an essential component of the Rome Statute system. Malawi believes that for the court to be successful, there is need to continue supporting the initiatives that would ensure the court's continued progress in its activities, including its preliminary examinations, investigations, and proceedings in various situations which either states parties or United Nations Security Council referred to the court or the prosecutor initiated proprio motu. Madam Speaker, in that context, I wish to make the following points. 1, the review mechanism continues to be a good initiative that may lead to universality and more cooperation. Malawi therefore supports the outcomes of the consideration by states parties of the recommendations of the independent experts and urges for their implementation going forward. At the center of the court's success, that is 2, at the center of the court's success is the requirement of regular resources for it to properly carry out its mandate. The resources come in both assessed and voluntary contributions. Malawi continues to make efforts in paying its assessed contributions and will ensure that its current contributions are paid up without further delay, and urges other states that have also not yet done so to consider paying their outstanding contributions to lessen the liquidity crisis, which is a threat to the courts. 3, the staffing modalities of the court will still remain another challenge that the states parties are seized with at the current ASP. Malawi appreciates the efforts of the delegation of Uganda in its proposal for the moratorium recruitment of staff from non-state parties. In addition, Malawi remains committed to the establishment of the permanent vetting process and the need to respect the principle of equitable geographical representation and regional rotation. Madam President, as I conclude, let me express my appreciation to the prosecutor and the president of the court for the elaborate reports of the work of their offices. The work of the court continues to grow, cementing the central nature of the court as the first permanent court in international criminal justice with the mandate of fighting impunity for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and aggression. As we look to the future, it is important that the court receives unwavering support for it to continue to occupy this role in the face of various challenges that it is facing. Madam Speaker, let me once again reaffirm my delegation's support and cooperation and readiness to constructively engage to realize the objectives of this Assembly. Let me thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for your statement. And the next speaker is Ms. Elinor Hammarskjöld, Director General for Legal Affairs of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Sweden. You have the floor.
Madam President, members of the Assembly, distinguished delegates, officials of the Court, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honoured to address this Assembly of States Parties. Sweden aligns itself with the statement made on behalf of the European Union and its member states. At the outset, I want to reiterate Sweden's support for the ICC. The court is unique as the only permanent international criminal court for serious crimes of international concern. It is also a victims' court because of the unique standing of victims. The Trust Fund for Victims is the cornerstone of the reparative justice for these victims. I'm proud to say that Sweden historically has been and continues to be one of the largest contributors to the fund. We call on others to join in contributing to its important work. Madam President, the court is facing unprecedented threats and attacks. Arrest warrants have been issued against several of the court's high officials simply for carrying out the mandate that we entrusted to them. This is unacceptable. We are deeply concerned that the court faces threats of sanctions. We will continue, together with the whole of the European Union, to defend the court from attempts to hinder its efforts to fulfill its core mandate. We thank the court's officials and staff for their continuous hard work. And thank you, Madam President, for your personal engagement in defending the interests of the court. Given the court's substantial workload and the external pressures it faces, enhancing its governance is of utmost importance. 5 years ago, we embarked on a journey to review the functioning of the court and the Rome Statute system. Much has since been done by the court to review and implement the recommendations from the independent experts, which we commend. Improving the working environment for the court staff has been a priority for Sweden during the review process. An important outcome was the introduction of a tenure policy for management positions. It's for the senior management of the court as a top priority to improve the workplace culture at the court. We note with appreciation the court's continued efforts to integrate a gender perspective into its activities, as well as the improvement in increasing the gender balance at the court. Sweden calls on the court to make further efforts to narrow the gender gap. Madam President, the ICC cannot provide justice to all victims of Rome Statute crimes on its own. Ending impunity and ensuring access to justice for victims are shared goals of the court and all states parties. Serious crimes of international concern are often complex, and their investigation and prosecution may need international cooperation to succeed. Joint efforts between states and the court is vital to the viability of the Rome Statute system. The secondment programme is an important tool in strengthening the cooperation and complementarity between the ICC and national investigations. Madam President, states' full cooperation with the court is essential for its ability to carry out its mandate. There are at present a record number of outstanding arrest warrants that must be executed. The court's success also depends on the timely payment of assessed contributions, and we join others in urging all states parties to pay their contributions in time and in full each year. Sweden remains a committed supporter of a viable, independent, effective and efficient international criminal court, and we continue to strive, as others do, for the universality of the Rome Statute. Victims of atrocious crimes deserve no less. We were pleased to formally welcome Armenia as the 124th party to the Rome Statute in February, and we also warmly welcomed Ukraine's ratification in October. We urge all states that have not yet done so to join the Rome Statute. Finally, I would like to extend a special thanks to our civil society colleagues. We highly value their constructive engagement with us and the court in our common endeavour to maintain and strengthen the operation of the ICC. Any threats and intimidation directed at representatives of civil society in these efforts are unacceptable. I thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Jeffrey Kermy, Ambassador of Malta to the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Madam President, I am honored to address the Assembly of State Parties, and I would like to thank you, Madam President, the Bureau, the Secretariat, and the various facilitators for making the necessary arrangements for the Assembly and for presenting us with renewed opportunities to strengthen the Court. At the outset, Malta fully aligns itself with the statement being delivered by Hungary on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We also join others in extending our warm congratulations to the new President of the Assembly, the new President of the Court, as well as the judges elected during the last session of the Assembly. We wish to reassure them of Malta's full and unwavering support for the work of the Court. Madam President, this year has been marked by persistent challenges to peace and justice. The deeply shocking international crimes being committed worldwide are deplorable. Now, more than ever, it is necessary for state parties to renew their commitment and to reaffirm their adherence to the values and principles of the Court. As the only permanent and independent international court with the mandate to bring to justice the persons responsible for the most serious crimes of concern to the international community, crimes that national courts are either unable or unwilling to prosecute, the ICC has an indispensable role in the pursuit of justice. We reaffirm that the primary responsibility for delivering criminal justice rests with state parties, and in this regard, we will continue to encourage national investigations and prosecutions. To support these efforts this year, we made a voluntary contribution to the Complementarity Trust Fund, established by the Office of the Prosecutor, to aid in the implementation of the recently launched policy on complementarity and cooperation. We stress that in our capacity as state parties, we have an obligation to cooperate fully with the Court. We must also ensure that the Court is neither hindered nor obstructed in carrying out its mandate, especially given the often complicated circumstances within which the Court must operate. Any retaliatory actions against the Court's elected officials, its personnel, and the Court as such are unacceptable. Such actions undermine the fundamental principles of international justice and the rule of law. In light of the challenging security environment, we must shield the Court from any coercive measures aimed at interfering with the independent performance of the functions and duties of its officials. Madam President, throughout its role as an elected member in the United Nations Security Council, Malta has continued to raise awareness about the utmost important mandate of the ICC. We emphasize the need for collective, constructive, and continuous dialogue to strengthen the relationship between the Court and the United Nations. We reiterate that a veto should not prevent the Security Council from taking action when mass atrocities are committed. This also applies with respect to referrals by the Security Council, in relation to which we stress the need for consistency and objectivity. Malta remains fully committed to promote the universal ratification of the Rome Statute. Only through universal ratification can the Court's effectiveness be ensured. We also emphasize the importance of the full implementation of the Rome Statute. We take this opportunity to join others in congratulating Armenia on becoming a party to the Rome Statute. We extend our congratulations to Ukraine for depositing its instrument of ratification, and we look forward to warmly welcoming them as the 125th state party on the 1st of January 2025. Madam President, we must also continue to ensure that the needs of victims remain at the very center of our efforts. We must continue to support the Trust Fund for Victims in its assistance and reparations mandate. It is for this reason that Malta has donated an unrestricted voluntary contribution to the Trust Fund for Victims for the 4th consecutive year. Malta welcomes the Office of the Prosecutor's recent policy initiatives relating to complementarity and cooperation, crimes involving sexual and gender-based crimes, and crimes against and affecting children. We must remain fully committed in supporting the Court's work done on this front. Finally, we reiterate that achieving equitable geographic representation and gender balance is a fundamental requirement for ensuring that the Court is representative of the world it serves. It is crucial that the Court sets a clear standard for a safe and inclusive workplace culture. Madam President, in closing, Malta reiterates its resolute commitment to the Court and encourages fellow state parties to look to the coming year with the aim of further strengthening the Court to bring justice to victims of crimes under the Rome Statute. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Olivier Bell, Ambassador of Belgium to the Netherlands. Vous avez la parole.
You have the floor. Thank you, Madam President. Today, our collective ideal of justice is in great danger. The court and its officials are facing intimidation, sanctions, threats, which are all intolerable. Belgium condemns them in the strongest possible terms and calls on all states party to fully support the court, both in word and especially in deed. The states must take all the steps that they can in order to protect the court against the effects of sanctions that could be adopted against it. But at the same time, the court must be given the wherewithal to operate properly. This means that we have to pay on time and in their entirety our contributions to the annual budget, and we also have to be effective in our cooperation with the court. And in a similar vein, my delegation would like to draw your attention to the following point. The risk of sanctions that the court is facing have revealed the rather extreme dependence that the court has vis-a-vis private service providers, especially when it comes to IT, finance, banks, and insurance. And in light of the current circumstances, we believe that it's indispensable to invite the court to explore avenues that could wean it off of this dependence, because it's the best way to support the court is by upholding its independence, its impartiality, and the greatest respect. So it's one of the court's duties is to make sure that we never give the impression that we're favoring some community of victims over others. All victims must be heard and respected. This is the very bedrock of the credibility of the system we've created. Madam President, this steadfast support is something that my country has shown towards the court from the very outset in a variety of ways. First of all, timely and sometimes anticipated payment of our annual contributions to the budget. This year, we've made an exceptional contribution of 700,000 euros to the Special Security Fund established by the Registry. Then we have a constant and abiding commitment vis-a-vis victims. We're active participants in the work of the Bureau and the Assembly. We've had enhanced and effective cooperation with the signing this year of a rather large number of enhanced cooperation agreements with the main bodies of the court. We also have implemented the principle of complementarity. For example, we've had trials of several alleged authors of crimes that had been committed abroad, and also Belgium's concrete mobilization this year at the United Nations General Assembly, bringing about the signing by 94 states of a declaration calling on the court, on everybody to protect the court against political pressure and interference. And despite all of the support from states parties, what we see is that day after day, horrors continue to rain upon people around the world. And it seems that the deterrent effect of the court is only partial. It's also because the statute is not yet universal. Now, to strengthen the effective deterrence of the Rome Statute, we have to make sure that we can urge other states to join. Now, in order to the states adopted by consensus in 2010, 2017, 2019 amendments on adopting a definition of the crime of aggression, and there's also been discussions introducing new war crimes under Article 8 of the statute. Now, these amendments will probably make it the statute more attractive to those countries because it offers broader protection for victims. Belgium would call on other states to ratify these amendments if they haven't done that. So, now, we think that we're very pleased to see that in July 2025 there will be a special session focusing on the crime of aggression in New York. We will be certainly very keen to be active participants in that, and we will give our full support for such crimes of aggression to be prosecuted by the court and under conditions that are similar to those of the three other crimes. My country also supports the amendment on the introduction of the crimes of slavery and slave trading. We would also like to take this opportunity to recall the States Party to sign and ratify the Convention of the Ljubljana, the Hague Convention. We welcome the accession of Armenia, and to conclude, we would in particular like to greet Ukraine, which recently deposited its instrument of ratification. And I can only conclude by thanking you for your commitment this year, something that we've seen as working along with you, and we have very great trust in the work that lies ahead for you as well. Thank you.
Merci pour votre intervention. And the next speaker is Her Excellency Ms. Carmen de la Soledad Moreno Toscano, Ambassador of Mexico to the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Mexico is grateful to the bodies of the International Criminal Court and the work that they have done in carrying out their duties. We are in a current geopolitical context that really is putting its operability and effectiveness under strain, faced with a great variety of different types of attacks. We condemn all of these attacks on the court and its staff, including the so-called sanctions. The court and its staff have the right to carry out their functions free of intimidation, and it's absolutely inadmissible that there should be some political interference when it comes to imparting justice. And this is why the progress of the three cases that are currently in chambers, as well as when it comes to reparations and the sentencing of Al-Hassan and the situation of Mali, both of these things not only show that the court is making justice a reality, but also shows how important the role of the court is when it comes to fighting against impunity in the cases of the most serious international crimes. The court should always be focused on the victims in everything that it does. And this is why it's absolutely vital to make sure that our approach to reparations does provide true justice to victims. Here, it's the Trust Fund for Victims plays a critical role. We have to support it, and by doing so, we would be reaffirming our collective commitment of all states parties to the statute to make sure that we can maintain and uphold the dignity and the rights of the victims. Madam President, states parties are under the obligation to do everything we can for the court to be able to carry out its tasks and its mandate and achieve its full potential. With this in mind, at the beginning of this year, Mexico, alongside Chile, referred the situation in the state of Palestine to the Office of the Prosecutor and presented an amicus curiae brief in favor of the courts exercising its jurisdiction in that territory for crimes committed there. The situation on the ground is getting worse and worse, and this is why we would urge all states parties to support the ICC for the well-being of Israelis and Palestinians alike. In fact, this last week, working with Chile, Costa Rica, Spain, France, and Luxembourg, we referred the situation of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan to the OTP in light of the deteriorating situation of women's and girls' rights in Afghanistan. With concrete steps like this, Mexico is actually bolstering its feminist-looking foreign policy, and it's because we believe that justice requires a gender perspective. In both cases, in both situations, the court can play a central role in achieving peace and stability in the region. But this requires the cooperation and support of states parties, including the execution of the 30 outstanding arrest warrants that have been issued by pretrial chambers. Now, we all know that one of the main challenges that the ICC system is facing is cooperation with states that are not parties to the Rome Statute. And in many situations, they can be a key player in the success of the court's work. And this is why we have to keep reaching out to them, trying to build trust and cooperation, a climate of cooperation that will bring the rest of the international community to join the ICC. We should also be focusing on achieving the universality of the Rome Statute, including the ratification of the amendments that we've adopted over the course of the past 25 years. Civil society has always been a major ally in these efforts, and we are sure that we will be able to count on civil society going forward. In this connection, we welcome the recent accession of Armenia and Ukraine to the Rome Statute. We reiterate our call to those countries that have yet to do so to ratify or to accede to the statute. The path towards universality is something that also offers us the opportunity to address issues such as double standards in justice, especially when it comes to international criminal justice and accountability. In fact, in order to strengthen accountability internally, alongside Gambia, Mexico moderated or led the recent adoption in the 6th Commission of the UNGA of a resolution to convene an intergovernmental conference seeking to negotiate and then adopt a new convention for the prevention and punishment of crimes against humanity. And this instrument would have the potential to strengthen the ties of cooperation and legal assistance amongst states, and also strengthen the adoption of national legislation, making it possible for the principle of complementarity to flourish. And when it comes to this, we welcome the new policy of the prosecutors on complementarity and cooperation. Effective exercise of complementarity is also one of the most effective ways of most effective resources at the court's disposal. Madam President, Mexico reiterates its steadfast support to the ICC as an independent and impartial institution. It constitutes a fundamental pillar of international justice system. Mexico would go further in reiterating its commitment to the victims of atrocities across all latitudes. Their suffering, their pain, their demand for justice should be what inspires us to never give up in our fight to make sure that the ICC, despite its limitations and deficiencies, strives ever forward to be exemplary in the area of accountability. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And next speaker is Her Excellency Ms. Georgina Guillon-Crio, Director General for Foreign Policy of Costa Rica. You have the floor.
Señora Presidenta.
President, Your Excellencies, delegates, the challenges that the international community faces are getting more acute, while the turbulence over the last weeks is putting to the test the commitment of each and every one of the states represented in this room to international law. It is the time for truth. The International Criminal Court is a key element in the international arena. We cannot have the luxury of relativizing its importance, nor can we weaken it. It was born, as indicated in the preamble of the Rome Statute, so that the most grave crimes for the international community would not remain without punishment. This court was based on the same principles and values as was a base of the Nuremberg Tribunal, and precisely there was a Nuremberg prosecutor, Benjamin Ferenc, who a lot of us know was one of the most fervent defenders and promoters of the court. And Costa Rica wants to recall one of the sentences which he would repeat insistently, that we have to substitute the rule of force for the rule of law. And as such, we have a historic commitment with international justice, with the integrity of the Rome Statute, and to safeguard the independence and impartiality of the court, the action that the fulfillment of its mandate against attacks and threats against judges, officials and countries and persons who cooperate with the court should be rejected by us unequivocally. And as states parties, we are called upon to condemn them, avoiding double standards. What we have to do in this assembly is to send out a clear political message defending international criminal justice and against any act of coercion. Costa Rica, in this sense, calls for would like to thank the Netherlands for its support and for the installation, and the court as well, which are suffering threats at the moment when it comes to fulfilling its work.
Señora Presidenta.
President, we are all called upon to cooperate with the court, and we want to show our consistent support for the court such that it can fulfill its work in an efficient and coherent way in all situations under its jurisdiction. The cooperation with the states parties, without exception, is vital in order to meet the fundamental objective to fight against impunity and provide justice to all victims of crimes who we owe. No victims, I repeat, no victims are worth less than others for their nationality, nor for their religion, nor for their ethnic group. Without cooperation, especially where it concerns the execution of arrest warrants of suspects for crimes underneath the jurisdiction of the court, the ICC has been impeded when it comes to completing its mandate. As part of its commitment to the court, Costa Rica has expressed its availability to host a regional office of the ICC in its capital, San Jose, without cost to the court. We believe that the opening of a regional office will offer multiple advantages for the reach, positioning and visibility of the court in Latin America. We know that this is at the beginning of discussions, but we would like to stress our support for this. President, we are aware of the financial restrictions that we all face in all countries. Costa Rica is not an exception in this regard, but this should not lead us to assign insufficient resources to the court, which would prevent it from meeting fully its mandate. Costa Rica calls for the adoption of a budget which is sufficient to meet all the requirements of the ICC under the principle of one sole court. Without stable resources, and which are sufficient for the court, the international community will put in risk its main tool for the future when it comes to preventing, dissuading, and repressing the worst crimes at international level, and as well as helping victims who should be at the heart of our action. Our commitment to international criminal justice must be achieved by strengthening the court, and in order to do so, my country is very pleased to look at the work of the review mechanism, as well as the daily efforts that the distinct working groups carry out, including the working group on governance, which Costa Rica co-presided. President, my delegation would like to stress the urgent need that there is to close the gap between the ICC jurisdiction where it concerns the crime of aggression. We support the harmonization of the court's jurisdiction on all fundamental crimes in order to strengthen accountability and end impunity. We search an ambitious result in the revision conference, and in this regard, and together with a group of states, we have circulated a debate document which concerns two options to revise the Rome Statute. Finally, we would like to reiterate that we have an obligation, a particular obligation to victims, to whom this Rome Statute gives a central role, which must be our prime concern and be at the very heart of our actions, guaranteeing their participation, their security, and their right to reparations, all of which requires having sufficient recourses for victims. And this is why we call for contributions for this trust fund. Meeting its responsibility towards victims constitutes not only a legal obligation for the International Criminal Court, but also an imperative moral action to preserve the principles of justice and humanity, which must guide us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Hiroshi Minami, Ambassador of Japan to the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to address the Assembly of State Parties on behalf of the Japanese government. First and foremost, I wish to express our profound appreciation to the ICC, its principals, and staff members for their tireless efforts in the vital fight against impunity. Japan warmly welcomes the appointment of Judge Tomoko Akane as the president of the court in March this year. Promoting the rule of law is the cornerstone of Japan's foreign policy. In January this year, our foreign minister visited the ICC and reaffirmed Japan's steadfast commitment to the rule of law and our unwavering support for the court. The ICC plays an indispensable role in strengthening the rule of law, thereby maintaining the peace and security of the international community. Allow me to highlight the following 3 points that we, as a long-standing supporter of the court, consider particularly important in our relationships with the ICC. Madam President, firstly, it is imperative to respect the independence of the ICC as a judicial institution and to ensure its security. The court, its personnel, and those cooperating with it must be safeguarded against any threats, attacks, or interference. In this regard, Japan contributed approximately €160,000 to the Special Fund for Security this year. And Japan is also considering an additional contribution to the fund. We remain resolute in our support for measures that protect the court and its staff. Secondly, universality and enhanced credibility of the ICC are crucial for its future. We believe that the two are interrelated. To advance the fight against impunity and make the court more effective, it is of paramount importance for the court to become truly universal, which entails increasing the number of states parties to the Rome Statute. From this perspective, we sincerely welcome Ukraine's ratification following that of Armenia and eagerly anticipate the accession of other states. We believe that approaches that are tailored to the specific circumstances of each region will be more effective in encouraging non-state parties to ratify the Rome Statute. In this context, we support further discussions on establishing regional representations. In pursuing universality, it is also vital to enhance the credibility of the court. The court must ensure that its procedures are fair and impartial. Enhanced dialogues between the states parties and the court, aimed at improving the court's functionality, will contribute to greater universality. Thirdly, as the largest contributor to the ICC's budget, Japan attaches great importance to financial prudence and efficiency in the management of the court's resources. For the ICC to remain sustainable, its finances must also be sustainable. In this respect, we would like to express our gratitude to the members of the CBF for their contribution to the court's administrative and budgetary measures. Also, in the context of the sustainable financing of the court, we take note of the issue of the extension of judges' terms, which represents a substantial portion of the Chamber's budget. In this regard, Japan appreciates the Chamber's efforts to expedite the proceedings in the cases of Ekotom Ngessona and Al-Hassan. The state parties must continue to consider effective means to address the issue of prolonged proceedings without undermining the independence of the court and chambers. Madam President, before concluding, I would like to mention Japan's contribution to supporting victims. We are very proud that our voluntary contributions to the Trust Fund for Victims have supported numerous survivors of sexual and gender-based violence in conflicts across Africa. As this support enters its 10th year, I am pleased to announce Japan's forthcoming contribution of €36,000 to the fund. In New York, we are honored to have served with Switzerland as a focal point for the ICC at the Security Council, serving as a bridge between the court and the council. Japan reaffirms its commitment to fighting against impunity and promoting the rule of law. We will continue to work with the ICC and other states parties through practical collaborations. We remain committed to supporting the court and its officials in the years to come. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. François Alabrune, Ambassador of France to the Netherlands. Vous avez la parole.
You have the floor. Madam President of the Assembly of States Parties, ladies and gentlemen, your honours, prosecutor, registrar, ladies and gentlemen, France expresses its full support for the declaration of the European Union and its state members pronounced by Hungary. At a national level, France would also like to state its constant support for the International Criminal Court. The role of the court is indeed essential when it comes to preventing and repressing the most serious crimes. It is also to render justice to victims of atrocities throughout the entire continent. The court is the only criminal court at international level which is a cornerstone in the fight against impunity. France supports the exercise by the court of its jurisdiction in all situations of which it is seized, and reiterates its commitment to the respect of international law. We know that the court is faced with significant challenges when it comes to fulfilling its mission, and more than ever, all states parties must come together in order to help the court meet these challenges. This unity is necessary in particular in order to strengthen the security of the court and of its staff, including after they cease in their functions. France firmly condemns any form of threat or sanction or attack against the court and its officials. Everything must be done to guarantee the protection of the court and to make it possible for it to exercise its mandate in complete independence and impartiality. Madam President, France support comes at an operational level, and where it comes to human resources as well, and also where it comes to the budget. At the operational level, France over the past years has closely cooperated with the bodies of the court in order to support its investigations and its activities. It co-chairs the working group on cooperation alongside Senegal, contributing to the mobilization of states parties with a view to providing concrete support to the activities of the court. And we will have the possibility to come back to the different ways of supporting and protecting the court during the plenary on cooperation on Thursday afternoon. With regards to human resources, France continues to make personnel available from the Ministry of Justice for the Office of the Prosecutor in order to deal with the increasing activities that it has. It is currently financing 3 programs of young experts in the 3 main organs of the court. At a budgetary level, France is the 3rd contributor to the ICC budget, and its support is reinforced through voluntary contribution to the trust funds of the court, and in particular the Trust Fund for Victims. The granting of reparations for victims and the access to justice for the survivors of mass crimes is imperative. And this was recalled during an international conference organized in Paris last September in partnership with the International Center for Transitional Justice. Madam President, before concluding, I would add 3 remarks. France wishes to see the universality of the Rome Statute, and in this regard, it very much welcomes the recent ratification by Ukraine and the participation of Armenia for the first time in our Assembly of States Parties. Furthermore, France recognizes the importance of the work that has been carried out by the review mechanism of the court, which is coming to the end of its mandate. The developments inspired by this review have made it possible for the court to improve its functioning, which is indispensable in order to fight effectively against impunity. Finally, France reiterates its attachment to the balance of legal systems with respect to linguistic rules provided for by the Rome Statute, to a better geographical representation and better representation between men and women. Respecting these principles is indispensable in order to guarantee the legitimacy of the international system in the fight against impunity. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your intervention.
Here is Ms. Monica Furness, Director, Legal Affairs Department of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Norway. You have the floor.
Madam President, let me start by welcoming Armenia as the 124th state party to the Rome Statute, and congratulating Ukraine on ratification of the statute, making it the 125th state party from 1st January next year. With these accessions, we are a few steps closer to universality. This is encouraging and necessary. There are too many ongoing conflicts where international law is not respected, with terrible human suffering as a consequence. It is in everyone's interest that the world we live in is based on universally agreed rules. Violations of international law are unacceptable always and everywhere. ICC plays a critical role in holding those responsible for the gravest crimes to account. Madam President, there is no doubt that the eyes of the world is on the court. It is our responsibility as states parties to make sure that the court has the tools to carry out its mandate. This includes adopting a robust budget. We must ensure that our court is fit for purpose. It cannot tackle an increasing and complex workload without sufficient resources, including funds to tackle increasing security needs. A solid regular budget also ensures the court's ability to operate independently. The perception of the court's independence and impartiality may be affected if we allow it to become dependent on voluntary contributions. Selective justice is harmful. We are failing the court if we do not remain principled in our approach to its work and decisions. Madam President, we are deeply concerned by attacks on the court and attempts to undermine it. We reiterate the UN General Assembly's condemnation of any threats, attacks, or interference against the court, its personnel, or those cooperating with it. The clear, strong, and unified voices of states parties are needed to defend the court's ability to deliver justice to all victims of the most serious crimes across its global mandate. During the past years, a lot of progress has been made to improve the functioning of the ICC, based on the independent expert review. The review process should not be a one-off exercise. We must continuously work together to strengthen the court and the Rome Statute system. Norway will continue to follow closely efforts to improve the work environment at the court. Madam President, the court relies on cooperation from states to fulfill its mandate. We urge all states to cooperate fully with the court, to allow access, to share evidence, and to execute arrest warrants. Norway is committed to do its part. Let there be no doubt about Norway's unwavering support for the International Criminal Court. We look forward to continuing our common fight against impunity during this Assembly and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next and final speaker of tonight is Mr. Louis-Martin Homais, Legal Advisor and Director General, International Law Bureau, Global Affairs of Canada. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Dear colleagues, last year we collectively celebrated the creation, 25 years and a generation ago, of the International Criminal Court. These states worked tirelessly in order to negotiate the Rome Statute, which set up this court. This realization was a turning point in the history of international criminal law. As a founding member, Canada believes in the promise of a court which is able to make perpetrators of international crimes, the most serious ones, to make them respond for their actions. And the International Criminal Court does not have the capacity to do so itself.
Canada still believes in the promise of the court, but we are currently navigating perilous waters. During last year's assembly, the court was already under unprecedented threats. Arrest warrants had been issued against 7 of its high officials, simply for carrying out the mandate given to them by states parties. Since then, the court has faced multiple cybersecurity breaches, political attacks, and additional threats, not just to the court itself, but to any state supporting the court. Because to sanction the court is to sanction each and every one of us. This is simply unacceptable. The court is empowered with the mandate that we, the states parties, have conferred upon it. In the Rome Statute's preamble, we states parties expressed our common concern that the delicate mosaic piecing our shared human heritage together may be shattered at any time. It is at this moment that we must all stand in unity with the court. Canada stands strongly and proudly in support of the court. Its ability to perform its work free from threats or retaliation is paramount. Madam President, Canada also stands ready to ensure the long-term sustainability of this court. This is a goal that requires the court to optimize its resources in the fight against impunity. Canada notes that the court has requested a substantial budget increase for the 3rd consecutive year. This is a worrying trend, my friends. We recognize the increased demand on the court in recent years. However, the need for fiscal responsibility is clear. It must be shared by all, in all aspects of ICC work, including prioritization of key elements of the court's mandate. Canada highlights the efforts of the registrar in that respect, in first identifying savings and efficiencies and areas to deprioritize before formulating a budget request based on reassessed and realistic priorities. This is a best practice which must be replicated across the court. In short, Madam President, there is a strong need for the court to be focused and efficient in its efforts to pursue accountability for those most responsible for serious international crimes in the interest of the long-term sustainability of the court. The principle of complementarity, which is a key pillar on which the court rests, must guide the court in managing its workload. When states parties have the demonstrated capacity and willingness to do so themselves, they retain the primary responsibility to investigate crimes falling under the Rome Statute and must be left to do so. At the same time, complementarity must meaningfully contribute to accountability. As one of the 6 countries to have referred the Venezuela I situation to the court in 2018, Canada attaches great importance to the developments of this investigation, and we will continue to pay close attention. States parties also bear the responsibility to strive for continuous improvement of the governance and operations of the court. Canada worked closely with many of you on several governance issues this year, including facilitating the legal aid discussion and working with partners across regional groups to ensure positive momentum on the need for travel expenditure reform. My friends, in light of the poor results of recent audit report on travel directive compliance, more work on this issue is pressing and urgent. Canada applauds the leadership of Ambassador Van den Issel and Ambassador Canu for steering the review mechanism to a successful conclusion. We contributed actively to the establishment of a tenure policy within the court and the moratorium on hiring employees from non-states parties, while also ensuring that the court retains the flexibility to hire individuals who are uniquely positioned to contribute to the court's mandate. Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, the cooperation is vital for the work of the court. The number of arrest warrants that haven't been executed continues to increase, which reveals the need that there is for greater cooperation by states parties. The execution of these arrest warrants must be carried out respecting all of the obligations of states under the Rome Statute and under international law. Universality of the Rome Statute is another essential element in the long-term success of the court, and Canada reiterates its call to states which are not yet parties to ratify the statute. And in this regard, we very much welcome the recent ratification of Ukraine, and we welcome very much as a new state party in January. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you. Merci pour votre intervention. We have exhausted our list of speakers for this afternoon. I would like to thank all the distinguished speakers today for their statements and the support pledged to the court in the fulfillment of this mandate. Thank you also for all the kind words addressed to the Presidency of the Assembly. Tomorrow we will start the plenary with the signing ceremony of an agreement between Poland and the International Criminal Court on the enforcement of sentences. We will then continue with general debate with speakers that were not able to speak today. We will start with His Excellency Mr. Luis Gilberto Murillo, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Colombia, and then continue with Her Excellency Yvonne Do Sap, the Minister of Justice of Namibia. I think we have indeed had a good discussion today, and unless there are any requests for the floor, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.